Elara Vance, at 32, was a creature of quiet competence. Her life in Seattle a meticulously calibrated balance of code, coffee, and the occasional escape to the Cascade foothills. Her mornings began before the city stirred, the soft glow of her monitor mirroring the nascent light filtering through her apartment windows in Queen Anne. A senior software engineer at Apex Solutions, a mid-sized but influential cloud infrastructure company nestled in South Lake Union, Elara thrived in the intricate logic of distributed systems. Her workspace, a testament to her minimalist tendencies, was devoid of clutter, save for a framed photo of Mount Rainier, a reminder of the vast, complex beauty beyond the binary. She found a similar beauty in her work, in the elegant solutions to intractable problems, in the invisible architecture that powered modern digital lives. For 7 years, Elara had poured her intellect into Apex, rising steadily through the ranks. Her reputation was built on reliability, an almost uncanny ability to foresee potential issues, and a methodical approach to debugging that earned her the nickname, the human linter, among her closest colleagues. She wasn't one for office politics or grandstanding. Her code, clean and efficient, spoke for itself. Weekends often found her backpacking along the Pacific Crest Trail, the rhythmic crunch of gravel underfoot and the crisp scent of pine clearing her mind, preparing her for another week of intricate challenges. Her apartment, a comfortable but unassuming space with a view of the Puget Sound, was her sanctuary, filled with books on system design and dog-eared trail guides. Life was good, predictable in its demands, rewarding in its complexities. Her current focus was Project Chimera, Apex's most ambitious undertaking yet. A complete overhaul of their legacy cloud storage architecture, promising a 40% reduction in operational costs and a significant boost in data retrieval speeds. It was a high-stakes, high-visibility initiative, attracting attention from the highest echelons of the company. Elara was leading the core data sharding module, a critical component that would dictate the project's success or failure. The pressure was immense, but she welcomed it, fueled by the intellectual challenge and the potential impact of her work. Then came Marcus Thorne. He arrived like a meticulously pressed storm front in early spring, precisely groomed, with an almost unnerving dedication to his tailored suits and a reputation for being a turnaround specialist. Marcus, in his late 40s, had been brought in as the new project manager for Chimera, ostensibly to streamline operations and ensure delivery. His first few weeks were a flurry of new processes, Gantt charts, and an endless stream of documentation requirements. He was a Virgo, as he'd often remind people, with a self-proclaimed obsession for order and detail, a trait he wielded like a weapon against anything he perceived as less than perfect. He micromanaged relentlessly, his piercing gaze dissecting every line item, every JIRA ticket, every Slack message. Engineers, accustomed to a degree of autonomy, began to bristle under his constant scrutiny, but Marcus, armed with executive backing and an unshakable belief in his own methods, pressed on. The incident that would shatter Elara's professional peace came swiftly and brutally. It was a Tuesday, late April, nearly 11 p.m. Project Chimera was in a critical phase, preparing for a pre-release internal demo. A last-minute, high-priority bug had been discovered in the data ingestion pipeline. A subtle memory leak that could destabilize the entire system during extended operation. The fix was complex, requiring a deep dive into an obscure corner of the codebase, and it fell to Elara to implement it. Hours blurred into a caffeine-fueled haze as she raced against the clock, the demo looming large. In her exhaustion, as she pushed the emergency hotfix to the main branch after rigorous local testing, she forgot to delete a single, innocuous comment line. //TODO. Refactor this entire damn module after demo Elara. It was a fleeting thought, a private note to herself, not a functional piece of code, and it held no bearing on the fix itself. It was caught by automated checks within minutes, reverted, and had zero impact on the system, the fix deployed flawlessly. An oversight, yes, a minor process deviation, but utterly harmless. Marcus Thorne, however, saw not a minor oversight but an opportunity. The next morning, he convened an emergency Project Chimera status review meeting, mandatory for the entire engineering team and key stakeholders, including the CTO, David Chen, and Elara's direct manager, Sarah Jenkins. The conference room, with its panoramic views of Lake Union, felt suffocating. Marcus, standing at the head of the polished oak table, projected a screenshot of Elara's single comment line onto the enormous screen. His voice, usually clipped, now adopted a gravitas usually reserved for major security breaches. "As you can see," he began, gesturing with a laser pointer at the highlighted line, "we had a critical process deviation last night. A senior engineer, Elara Vance, pushed an unauthorized comment directly into our production main branch. While the code itself was inert, this represents an unacceptable breach of protocol, a failure to adhere to our new, stringent CI/CD guidelines, and a blatant disregard for the professional standards required on a project of Chimera's magnitude." Elara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. Her face flushed scarlet. She tried to interject, to explain the context, the exhaustion, the immediate revert, the lack of impact. But Marcus cut her off with a dismissive wave. "There are no excuses for shortcuts, Elara, especially not from someone in your position. This incident, while seemingly minor, underscores precisely why we need rigorous oversight. It highlights a systemic issue of complacency that I am here to eradicate." He continued, using her tiny mistake as a springboard to lecture the entire team on the absolute necessity of his new, often cumbersome, processes. He spoke of the fragility of the system, the catastrophic potential of even seemingly innocuous deviations, projecting an air of profound disappointment. David Chen, the CTO, shifted uncomfortably, and Sarah Jenkins stared at her hands, unable to meet Elara's gaze. The message was clear. Elara was incompetent, irresponsible, and a prime example of the problem Marcus was hired to fix. The humiliation was absolute, a public stripping of her professional integrity, an unwarranted character assassination played out for all to see. Elara endured the rest of the meeting in a daze, her mind a buzzing hive of shame and indignation. Each of Marcus's words felt like a fresh wound, twisting the knife deeper. When the meeting finally concluded, the room emptied quickly, a palpable awkwardness hanging in the air. A few sympathetic glances were cast her way, but no one dared approach, lest they incur Marcus's wrath. Elara felt utterly alone, her quiet confidence shattered. She walked back to her desk, the fluorescent lights of the office corridor suddenly too harsh, the hum of servers too loud. Her hands trembled as she sat down, staring at her monitor, unable to focus. The analytical part of her brain, usually so precise, was overwhelmed by a tidal wave of raw emotion: anger, profound injustice, and a searing, burning humiliation. She packed her laptop mechanically, her usual meticulousness giving way to a frantic desire to escape. She mumbled something about a migraine to Sarah, who nodded vaguely, still avoiding eye contact. The commute home, usually a chance to decompress, was a blur of angry tears and simmering resentment. Once inside her apartment, the sanctuary now felt like a cage. She sank onto her sofa, pulling her knees to her chest, and just wept. Big, silent tears that tasted of salt and defeat. 7 years of dedication, of quiet, reliable work, reduced to a single, inconsequential comment line, weaponized and used to publicly dismantle her reputation. Marcus Thorne hadn't just criticized her work. He had attacked her very identity as a competent engineer. He hadn't sought to correct, he had sought to diminish. The initial impulse was to quit, to send a blistering resignation email, to walk away from Apex and the toxic environment Marcus had created. But even as the thought formed, a deeper, colder current began to run through her. Resignation was surrender. It was letting Marcus win. As the tears subsided, a flicker of her analytical mind reasserted itself, cutting through the emotional fog. She replayed Marcus's words, his condescending tone, the exaggerated severity. And then, a memory surfaced. A casual conversation weeks ago with a colleague about the mounting technical debt in the data processing layer Marcus had streamlined. Another, about the unrealistic timelines he'd pushed through without consulting the infrastructure team, leading to last-minute scrambles and hastily implemented workarounds. Suddenly, her own tiny mistake seemed ludicrously small compared to the potential flaws Marcus was actively creating, or worse, ignoring. His meticulousness, she realized, was a performance, a shield to deflect scrutiny from his own deeper, more systemic mismanagement. The thought ignited a spark of something new within her, not just anger, but a cold, steely resolve. Elara Vance was not a crier, nor a quitter. She was a problem solver. And Marcus Thorne, with his arrogant posturing and hypocritical processes, was a very large, very complex problem. Her analytical brain, usually reserved for intricate code, now turned its formidable power inward, not for self-pity, but for strategy. She spent the next few days in a state of quiet observation, going through the motions at work, completing her tasks with her usual efficiency, but her true focus was elsewhere. She listened intently in meetings, paid close attention to Slack channels, and reviewed Jira tickets with a forensic eye. The pieces began to fall into place. Marcus's rigorous processes were, in reality, a labyrinthine mess. He overloaded the teams with documentation, but the documentation itself was often inconsistent, contradictory, or outright incomplete. He demanded detailed reports, but then ignored the red flags embedded within them. He pushed for aggressive timelines, but failed to allocate adequate resources, leading to corners being cut and technical debt accumulating faster than ever. Elara's hidden advantage was her deep, intimate knowledge of Project Chimera, particularly the underlying infrastructure and data flows. She had been there since its inception, contributing to its design, understanding its every nuance. Marcus, a project manager, understood charts and timelines, but he didn't grasp the intricate technical dependencies or the subtle fragilities of the system. He operated on a superficial level, concerned with optics and adherence to his own rules, not the underlying health of the project. Her plan began to solidify, born not of malice, but of a profound sense of justice and a fierce dedication to engineering integrity. She wouldn't just expose him. She would perform a postmortem, a meticulous, data-driven autopsy of his project management, just as they would after a major system outage. She would treat Marcus's leadership as an incident that required a thorough, unbiased investigation. Her tiny mistake would be the catalyst, the seemingly innocuous starting point for a deep dive into the systemic failures he orchestrated. Working discreetly from her home office, well after Apex's offices had emptied, Elara began her quiet campaign of documentation. She utilized her personal laptop, ensuring no digital footprint on company machines. A new, encrypted drive became her vault of evidence. She started with the most obvious, Marcus's own process documents. She found inconsistencies, conflicting instructions, and areas where his mandates actively hindered productivity or introduced risk. She cross-referenced these with internal audit reports from previous quarters, showing a stark decline in certain key performance indicators since his arrival, increased bug report rates, longer resolution times for critical issues, and a noticeable drop in team morale metrics from anonymous surveys. Then she dug deeper. She pulled Git commit logs, not to find mistakes, but to track the rapid, often ad hoc changes Marcus's pressure forced engineers to make, changes that introduced technical debt. She cross-referenced these with Jira tickets, identifying where Marcus had overridden engineering estimates with his own unrealistic timelines. She scoured Slack channels, meticulously archiving conversations where engineers voiced concerns that Marcus had dismissed or ignored. She found instances of resource misallocation, where critical personnel were pulled off essential tasks to work on non-priority, optics-focused deliverables for Marcus's presentations. She discovered a series of small, cascading failures, minor outages, data inconsistencies, performance degradations, that Marcus had dismissed as isolated incidents or blamed on legacy system instability, but which Elara could now trace directly back to his management decisions and process changes. Each point was backed by irrefutable, objective data. Timestamps, log entries, email chains, budget overruns from the finance system, links to internal dashboards, and even recorded meeting minutes that subtly highlighted his dismissive attitude towards technical warnings. She was not searching for character flaws, she was searching for data points. Her approach was clinical, dispassionate. She was building a case, piece by painstaking piece, a technical audit of a project manager's catastrophic impact on a critical project. Her motivation wasn't spite, though a residue of it still lingered, but a profound belief in engineering excellence and accountability. She would ensure that the truth, as revealed by the data, would speak for itself. Her investigation became her solace, her way of reclaiming control, of turning her shame into a weapon of cold, hard facts. The days blurred into weeks, her evenings spent meticulously organizing and annotating her findings, the scent of midnight coffee her constant companion. She was building a bomb, not of destruction, but of undeniable evidence, set to detonate at the precise moment of maximum impact. The inevitable cracks in Project Chimera began to show, precisely as Elara had predicted. 2 months after Marcus Thorne's public shaming, the project was struggling. Deadlines were missed, not by days, but by weeks. The promised 40% cost reduction was a distant fantasy, with budget overruns starting to accumulate. Performance issues, initially dismissed as minor hiccups, were becoming more frequent and severe, impacting internal user experience. The CTO, David Chen, began to schedule more frequent, increasingly tense project health reviews. Marcus, ever the showman, would spin these setbacks, blaming unforeseen technical complexities or team communication issues, cleverly deflecting blame. Elara waited. She continued her quiet work, polishing her postmortem, organizing it into a professional, company template-compliant document titled Project Chimera Phase 1 Technical Postmortem and Risk Analysis, a data-driven review. It was devoid of emotion, a pure distillation of facts, figures, and irrefutable evidence. The moment arrived during one such project health review. David Chen, his face etched with worry, opened the meeting, acknowledging the mounting concerns. Marcus, ever eager to seize control, launched into a prepared presentation, a glossy slideshow filled with optimistic projections and vague assurances. He minimized the setbacks, attributing them to external factors, and even subtly hinted at certain engineers' resistance to new processes as a contributing factor. A thinly veiled jab at Elara and her colleagues. When Marcus concluded, triumphant in his self-serving narrative, David Chen sighed, rubbing his temples. "Thank you, Marcus. Are there any other perspectives or concerns from the team?" he asked, his gaze sweeping across the room. Elara took a deep breath. This was it. She raised her hand calmly. "Yes, David. I've compiled a detailed technical analysis of Project Chimera's first phase based on the data available to us. I believe it offers a more granular perspective on the project's current health and potential risks." Her voice was clear, steady, devoid of any emotional inflection. Marcus's head snapped towards her, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "Elara, we've just had a comprehensive overview. Your input is always valued, but perhaps a separate meeting for detailed technical discussions would be more appropriate." He tried to dismiss her, to reassert control. But David Chen, sensing a different kind of energy, intervened. "No, Marcus, I think this is precisely the forum for it. Elara, please project your document." With a click, Elara's document appeared on the screen, its title crisp and professional. She began, her voice a calm, even monotone, like a seasoned investigator presenting evidence. "As you know," she started, "a postmortem typically begins with an incident. My analysis starts by addressing the critical process deviation, identified on April 27th, involving a misplaced comment line. A screenshot of her tiny mistake appeared, framed within a standard incident report template, clearly categorizing it as Category 1. Minimal impact, immediate resolution. This incident, while a process breach, had zero operational impact and was resolved within minutes. Then, with the precision of a surgeon, she transitioned. However, my investigation uncovered a series of systemic issues, which I've categorized as Category 2 and Category 3 incidents, representing significant and ongoing risks to Project Chimera's success. These incidents, unlike my minor comment, have had measurable negative impacts on our timelines, budget, and system stability. The room grew utterly silent. Marcus's face, initially dismissive, slowly drained of color. Elara methodically presented her findings. Firstly, resource allocation under the new PM structure shows a 30% deviation from optimal staffing models, leading to bottlenecking in critical path modules. She projected Gantt charts, comparing original plans to Marcus's revised ones, highlighting discrepancies and their impact on engineer burnout. Evidence from internal JIRA velocity reports and Slack communications confirms engineers raising concerns over workload, which were subsequently overridden. Time-stamped Slack messages from engineers, politely expressing concern about being stretched too thin, flashed on the screen, often followed by Marcus's curt, dismissive replies. Secondly, the revised data ingestion pipeline, implemented under the new management, introduced a critical dependency on an external, unvetted third-party API. This resulted in 3 distinct service degradations last month alone, impacting internal testing environments and causing significant delays. She presented system logs, showing cascading failures, correlating them directly to the new pipeline's deployment dates under Marcus's directive. The risk assessment for this dependency was not properly escalated or addressed. Thirdly, despite claims of streamlining, our average bug resolution time has increased by 15% since the inception of the new processes. This is directly attributable to the increased bureaucratic overhead for engineers to even report issues, as well as a growing backlog of technical debt stemming from forced, rapid development cycles. She displayed graphs, clean and irrefutable, showing a clear spike in open technical debt tickets and an inverse trend in closed bug reports since Marcus took over. Each point was accompanied by direct links to internal company systems, JIRA tickets, Git commit hashes, detailed expense reports showing budget overruns, Slack conversations, internal email threads, performance metrics from dashboards, all verifiable, all objective. Elara spoke for nearly an hour, her voice unwavering, presenting a meticulously constructed narrative of mismanagement, hubris, and an arrogant disregard for technical realities. She didn't accuse, she simply presented data. Marcus, meanwhile, had begun to sweat. He tried to interrupt. "This is preposterous, Elara. You're cherry-picking data. This is a personal attack." "The data is all from Apex's internal systems, Marcus," Elara calmly countered, her gaze unwavering. "It's available to anyone with the appropriate access. This is not an attack, it's an audit, and my analysis provides direct links to every single data point presented." David Chen, a veteran of countless corporate battles, held up a hand, silencing Marcus. His expression had shifted from worry to a grim recognition, then to a steely resolve. He knew an execution when he saw one. This wasn't petty revenge, it was a professional dismantling. When Elara finished, the room was thick with silence. David Chen looked directly at Marcus. "Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously low, "I think we have a lot to discuss. Privately. Effective immediately, Elara Vance will be stepping in as the interim project lead for Chimera. Elara, please ensure you have all the support you need to stabilize the project. We'll talk more about a formal transition and the next steps later this week." Marcus Thorne was not fired on the spot, but his reign over Project Chimera, and indeed his career at Apex Solutions, was over. He was quietly placed on administrative leave the next day, then his name simply vanished from the company directory a few weeks later. His reputation, once polished and formidable, was irrevocably tarnished, marked by the meticulous data Elara had laid bare. For Elara, the feeling wasn't one of triumphant glee, but of a deep, quiet satisfaction. Justice delivered not with an emotional outburst, but with the cold, hard logic she understood best. The tiny mistake that had almost derailed her career had become the stepping stone to a profound vindication. She didn't seek revenge for personal gain, but for the integrity of her work, for the truth of the project, for the team she implicitly led. The following weekend, Elara found herself back on the trails, the crisp scent of pine and damp earth filling her lungs. The rhythm of her footsteps was steady, purposeful. Mount Rainier loomed in the distance, majestic and unyielding, a testament to enduring strength. Her tiny mistake was a distant memory, overshadowed by the impact of her courage and meticulousness. She had found her voice, not in anger, but in data. And in doing so, she had not only saved a critical project but had also reclaimed her own narrative, proving that true power lay not in arrogance, but in the unwavering pursuit of truth.